Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this edition of Framing the Future, a series of webinars for the Maryland Forestry Foundation provides each month on the third Thursday at 1 o'clock to talk about issues of significance that we believe will frame the future of discussion and decision-making about forestry in Maryland. The series is recorded. It is available on our website, marylandforestryfoundation.org. The previous webinars in this series are all posted at the present time, and this one should be posted within the next few days after it's completed and edited a little bit. Mostly to eliminate my crazy comments at the beginning. Just want to welcome all of you again and say that we look forward to having you. We have some exciting sessions coming up, which I'll comment on at the end of the sessions. Let me turn it over to our series moderator, Megan Carr, one of our early Mel Fellows, a urban forester in the city of Baltimore, who is our series moderator. Megan?
Thank you, Gary. And thanks everyone for being with us here today for another installment in the Framing the Future webinar series. As Gary was saying, we do have more info and previous sessions up on the Maryland Forestry Foundation website. That's marylandforestryfoundation.org. And then you can click on the top at webinars. You can go to a page there to view all of our previous installments and to sign up for our email list. Those emails are only announcements about the upcoming webinars and links to register. So if you'd like to get on the mailing list for future sessions, we would be very happy to have you. A couple quick housekeeping notes before we begin today's session. We do welcome discussion and we have a Q&A function you can access at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. So we have some time set aside at the end of today's session when Rob is going to be able to respond to your questions. I'll read those aloud for folks who are tuning in via the recordings later on. And with that, we will jump in and get to learn more about the White Oak Initiative. Rob Felt is the Forest Planning Supervisor for the Maryland DNR Forest Service and has worked for the Maryland Forest Service for 19 years. He has a BS in Forestry and a Master of Forestry degree from Virginia Tech. His work focuses on Chesapeake Bay restoration, state forest certification and management, carbon sequestration and storage, land use analysis and policy, the American Tree Farm System, and more. So he stays busy. He also manages a grant provided by the White Oak Initiative for DNR and has been involved with the project since 2020. So thank you, Rob. I'll let you take over.
All right. Thanks, Megan. And thanks, Gary. Happy to be here today. I guess, do I need to go ahead and share my window then?
Yep, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see that. I am here to talk to you a little bit today about the White Oak Initiative, what it is and what we've done in Maryland so far since 2020. And so we'll just go ahead and jump right in there. So first of all, not knowing who's on the webinar today and the audience, just want to point out what white oak is. White oak is a group of trees in the Quercus genus, and we're specifically talking about Quercus alba, commonly called white oak in our forests. There are other white oaks like swamp white oak and chestnut oak. And you can identify it by these rounded lobes and sinuses on these leaves and the bark that you can see on the trees in the woods. Nice sloughing gray bark, suitable for some wildlife species. And then we have a bud here, and then of course the acorns that it's known for. So it's an important wildlife tree. Lots of animals use it, browse on it. They eat the acorns. Deer, turkey, squirrels, of course. And then we have blue jays that help distribute the acorns in the fall. I was surprised to find that it's home to more species of Lepidoptera, or moths and butterflies, than any other tree species, making them an important food destination for them. them, and the wildlife that feed on them. And so white oak acorns are one of the most preferred acorns for many animals and warblers and bats, like to nest in the bark that sloughs from the white oak. And it's just really a really important tree for our environment. But it's also an important tree to our economy. You can get barrel staves from it, probably one of the more important uses, cabinets, caskets, doors, flooring, furniture, paneling, veneer. We use it quite a bit for stakes. We use it to hold up our tree planting stakes tubes because it's known for its resiliency and its resistance to rot. And like I said, barrel staves, really important use. And I can't imagine, standing in a warehouse like this with all of this, what's probably bourbon, white oak staves for bourbon. You can only get the color and the flavor from charred white oak barrels. These barrels are, you'll notice that there are no knots in any of these barrels. You don't want leaky barrels. And so the foresters that are out there looking for procurement foresters that are looking for the wood to build these barrels are pretty much selecting the bottom or butt log of these trees. So they need really good wood, good white oak for these barrels. Where does it occur? Anywhere from Maine to eastern Texas and from Florida to Minnesota. You'll find it out there in our woods, all over Maryland. So in Maryland, if you go out there, you'll find probably an oak hickory forest. It's the most common forest type in our state. Log pine on the shore. But white oak grows everywhere. Southern Maryland, a lot of it down there, and we have a really great white oak in Western Maryland. So enter the White Oak Initiative. How did it come about? So we have those procurement foresters that I mentioned before that are out there in the woods buying lumber to make these barrels for bourbon. Started to notice some things. So it's a diverse coalition of partners committed to long-term sustainability of America's white oak forests, as well as the economic, social, and environmental benefits they provide. The goal is to bring together end users, private landowners, researchers, industry, state, and federal agencies, and conservation groups to help sustain white oak into the future. So we have a lot of these folks, a lot of institutions and organizations coming together. And they developed a White Oak Initiative assessment and conservation plan. So the assessment portion, how do you assess a forest? What makes it? What indicates that it's healthy and growing well and sustainable? Got this fence here, probably keeping the deer out on one side, and protecting the regeneration on the other side there. So a traditional method of assessing a forest's quality, health is volume of wood, but you could also look at the regeneration, the deer pressure, diseases, and invasives. So we've got a map here of board foot volume of white oak, in particular from the U.S. Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis section. When they take these plots all over the country, there's about 900 in Maryland, and about between 400 or 500 of those in Maryland have forests. So looking at the data, the standing volume of white oak in the woods, you can see, the Carolinas, West Virginia, Kentucky, Missouri, all have a large quantity of white oak out there in the woods. Western Maryland, Southern Maryland, like I said before, also a good amount. In Maryland, we have, it's the fourth largest volume tree by cubic foot volume in the state. The state is a little old; it's from 2017, but it really hasn't changed much. And you can see it's number 4 on the list here. And we also have yellow poplar and red maple and sweet gum, all up there, and all the main competitors for white oak. So, if we have a lot of volume, is that necessarily a healthy forest? Here we've got some old growth forest in Western Maryland, one of our state forests, some beautiful oak trees. So in the assessment, they looked at, or rather the findings from the assessment found that white oak is widespread with a range of more than 104 million forest land acres in the country. It's largely mature, with about 75% of all surveyed white oak acres that can be classified as at least mature, and they call it 75 years or older. White oak it's becoming increasingly prevalent as large trees. So the white oaks we have are getting older, they're getting larger, but the seedling abundance is variable and saplings are scarce. About 87% have no white oak seedlings present in the understory. So white oak saplings were absent from 72% of mature white oak acres. And so, they also found that what you do in the woods matters and how it affects white oak regeneration. We've got this guy here with his, brush axe. He's getting out there trying to make a difference in his wood lot. So they looked at a lot of data and maps, and I won't get into all of that, but basically the several maps all pointed to and made up this final score map on the right. And Maryland was lower in the probability of success for some reasons, regulatory and the ability to make management occur on the landscape. And so we got to see the initial results of this, but we pushed back a little bit on it because of if you look at Garrett County, it's scoring pretty low, and the surrounding areas are not. So we challenged that a little bit, but otherwise, the assessment was pretty good. And you see the Eastern Shore popping out a little higher there. So problem number 1, white oaks are growing. They're growing older, but there aren't enough or any white oak saplings in our woods to take their place in the future. Problem number 2, we aren't providing good growing conditions. There's too much light and other trees take over, or there's not enough light and saplings don't get enough. So what do we do? What do they recommend? Well, they recommend to establish white oak seedlings where there aren't any now, obviously. Where seedlings are established, ensure that they can grow to become the next generation of mature oak forests. A large percentage of the nation's forest land is owned by families and individuals. And they want to work with thousands of landowners to complete treatments for oak regeneration and release. There's forest management prescriptions, and they want to develop longer term management plans and commitments with private landowners, focus on white oak, desirable white oak outcomes, and also work with public land managers and large private acreage owners, which we're doing. We're doing a little bit of both of that here. So long-term goals. That should say by 2070. The central hardwood regions, they want to see a healthy balance of young and mature white and upland oak trees. They found that management prescriptions that work for white oak will also work for other oaks. They want to ensure that there's a strong supply chain, including foresters, logging operators, and markets in priority areas. So our ability to do management on the ground is a large way tied to the availability of foresters, people that can do the operations on the ground, and also being able to move the wood that we cut off of the land into markets. So we really need strong markets. And public lands, they want to see them managed across the region to create large core areas of healthy upland oak to draw from. And the target is 100 million acres, all by 2070. So now, in the short term, by 2025, this came out 2 or 3 years ago. Like I said, we've been involved with this since 2020. They want to reach and train 4,000 forest practitioners and logging operators with management guidelines. They want to train 500 to 1,000 foresters, rather, with oak management techniques and being able to identify when there isn't sufficient regeneration on the ground. They want to reach 50,000 landowners with information about oak sustainability. Connect 5,000 landowners with practitioners and foresters in an effort to restore oak sustainability and educate them about sustainability. They want to reach 1,500 landowners about managing their property for upland oak and treat 100,000 acres to establish oak seedlings and release saplings. And finally, establish 9 demonstration areas on public or private land. So private land partners are a major part of this. You can see in the region there's at least 50%, more than 50% of our landowners are private family landowners, followed by corporate and some other private like nonprofits, and then government is about 25%. And we have to acknowledge that there needs to be action taken on the ground. And I'm also the tree farm administrator in Maryland, and I always note that timber management is more familiar, and I think tree farmers are more comfortable with it. And you can see the other reasons for folks owning land. Protect beauty, protect wildlife habitat, privacy, recreation, hunting, land investment. Timber usually falls out near the bottom. And that's fine. Folks own land for many reasons, and they enjoy it, and but we can also utilize it. So the assessment and conservation plan recommended 10 management practices that we can do to help white oak. First one is afforestation. So planting trees where there haven't been trees before, preferably with a heavy oak component, and specifically white oak. Tree planting is one thing, but you also need to manage it. And they also have 9 practices designed to initiate and develop advanced regeneration, reduce competitors, ensure that harvesting is used properly to encourage oak regeneration, like a shelterwood harvest, cultivate and establish oak trees, and control deer populations. We've got a beautiful buck here in the woods. So management practices need to occur at specific times. And the conservation plan, I have this nice graph in there for landowners and anybody that's interested about when most of these practices can take place. So underplanting and enhancement planting. Generally, you're looking at enhancement planting, in the regeneration phase after a harvest. You may go back in and plant. We tend to not plant any of our lands anymore. We have the practices that we use. We generally get sufficient oak regeneration, but then you may want to enhance it with white oak in particular. And in these large stall timber phase, you still have that overstory, and that's where your underplanting comes in. If you don't have sufficient white oak regeneration, and you need to protect it from deer or for whatever reason, scarification. So those nuts that are falling on the ground, they like bare mineral soil. Thick duff layer can inhibit germination. And mid-story and overstory removal. Getting more light to the ground. Making sure those, if you do have seedling establishment or some advanced saplings, you need to get them more light. It tends to be the name of the game. Site preparation and for regeneration. So you can see where that it comes in the regenerating phase and the early sapling phase. What are you going to do to control competition? Been using a lot of mulcher heads for our equipment lately. Those have been really handy doing some of the work to reduce the some of that competition out there. Fines and other prescribed fire, something that's, in my opinion, underutilized. We don't use a lot of fire on state land a lot. The problem with fire is the weather doesn't always cooperate, and it's hard to get the resources available to make sure it's done safely and properly. And so there's a lot of factors, environmental factors involved with using fire. Fire is an excellent tool for regenerating oak. Like I said about the scarification, you can remove that that duff layer with the light brown fire, and oaks in particular are well suited to fire. They're adapted to fire. They put a lot of energy initially into growing roots, and those roots will survive a light fire, top fire, where other tree species and competitors and vines may not. So that they are well adapted to that. Let's see, crop tree release. You can do that. Carpet thinning, group openings and gap cuts. Basically, the last 3 are basically for mature stands. 2H ferment cut. I don't see that a lot. And then shelterwood establishment. And so, if you're not familiar with the shelterwood, you're basically retaining as much of the overstory as you can in order to control the light. And on a really good site, you're going to have trouble with like poplar and red maple outcompeting oaks. And so white oak in particular is more shade tolerant than other oak species. So it's well suited for these kind of management prescriptions. And also fire White oak is also just uniquely suited to fire because it heals well after a fire, and the compartmentalization really is well suited to it for healing those wounds after the fire on the bark of the tree. So what have we done in Maryland? So we received a subrecipient grant from an LSR landscape scale restoration grant that was managed by the American Forest Foundation. The grants are issued by the U.S. Forest Service, and we've been a part of 2 of those so far. So since 2020, we've hosted 1 and now 2 webinars on the White Oak Initiative, needed for upland oak management. And let's see, we purchased 3 seed rakes for acorn collections. Had some success there and had some volunteers go out there and use some of these push behind seed rakes to pick them up. And I got a picture I'll show you. Let's see, we developed handouts for how to collect and bag the seedlings, the seed acorns rather, sorry. And you wouldn't think so, but you have to collect them a certain way. You always keep the sinkers. You float the acorns in water, and then those are the ones you keep that fall to the bottom. And then we've shipped several bags to the State Tree Nursery and helped with their seed collection. The thing about their nursery is that there's fewer and fewer seed suppliers these days. They tend to be like these mom and pop sort of groups that have been providing seed to nurseries across the country, and they're starting to retire and go out of business. So it's getting harder and harder, is what I'm told. And then we developed a bunch of materials and publications. We've utilized some of the resources from the White Oak Initiative website and those to the DNR web pages. So, like I said, we have a really nice specific guidelines for Maryland for collecting acorns and getting that seed to our State Tree Nursery. We purchased the walk behind nut rake. This is a toe behind, but you can see how these tines on the rollers will grab those acorns and deposit them into the hopper. It's a really efficient way of collecting a lot of acorns really fast. Then we had a workshop in 2022 at the Vormer Ag Center. We had about 50 folks show up for that. Gave a similar presentation, and then we went out and demonstrated our sawmill. That's Dan Ryder, who's a member of our staff. Had a bunch of folks ask a lot of questions about white oak and just managing a property. Let's see. So we had 16 people indicate that they were interested in a forest stewardship plan from that, and then 16 others that we followed up with wanted to do some tree planting. So we called that a pretty good turnout and successful event. And then just recently we had one at Seneca Creek State Park with about 30 participants. So on the whole, we have reached 80 Maryland landowners. And part of our work was to perform I had one fellow come up to me and ask me how I got his name and how he got this letter in the mail from me, inviting him to this workshop. And I said, well, we did an analysis of a lot of geographic indicators. So I was able to use geographic information systems or GIS to figure out how many folks in Maryland have 10 or more acres of forest in our targeted area, and how many folks have maybe 5 acres of land to plant. And so from that, I was able to narrow it down to about 3,500 people for each of our workshops. And usually when you do those kind of mailings, you get maybe a 2% return rate, and that was true in both of our cases. We had good turnout. And so, the 2025 workshop, we had 10 people indicate they wanted a forest stewardship plan or had interest in one. And the same number of folks interested in planting. So we also had Isaac Whitmore, who's on this slide here, giving a talk about tree planting programs that Maryland DNR has, and how folks can get involved. And there's probably something for everyone. You don't have to have hundreds of acres to plant. We can we'll find a tree and figure out how to get you a tree somehow. We have our 5 million trees program right now, and you can get some tree planting done for free. And then we had some nice boards left over that we donated to the state park for their use. Okay, so we also worked at establishing a demonstration area. We have demonstration forests all over the state. These tend to be much smaller than our regular state forests. This one in Harford County, we used some of our funding to do some site preparation and clear out some sweet gum that had taken over, and the forest had been private land before, and you can sort of see the difference in the stands here, where the state forest had been cut over pretty hard prior to us buying it. And so we had to come in and remove a bunch of sweet gum that had become established and really took over in that area. And so we augmented that with some white oak plantings, and then we did some understory planting in a mature stand over here to get some more white oak established. And all told, it's about 5 acres. And right now we're working to add some signage talking about the demonstration area and how folks can get involved. And let's see, the parking area here, and there's a trail that runs down between the two areas, but it's really tough corner right there right now. We're still in the process of installing some parking areas there. We got Stony Forest, this tract of Stony Forest in 2020, and it's about 900 acres. So happy to see some demonstration going on in one of our demonstration forests. And like I said, here's the pole stand opening after the site preparation. Use that mulcher head. You can still see how the sweet gum is still making an effort to there. So we've got white oaks planted, and hopefully see some good results from that soon. And then our under planting. It's a little shady here, but I'm hoping that the white oak will get established. And there's some already on the ground there. But those may be fodder for deer. So we'll see how these stakes and tubes hold up, and hopefully protect those white oak seedlings. And finally, we're working with University of Kentucky to do a progeny test. So they've sent seed from all over the country, various strains, to our state tree nursery, and we set aside a few acres there and had all of those trees planted. And researchers will come back periodically over the course of the next 15 years to see how the white oaks are doing from various regions. I'm told that we should be proud because we sent some seed from the champion in Cecil County, I think. And the Cecil County seed stock they've told us, is among the best that they've ever seen, which really surprised me. So I haven't been up there, but I'm curious to see what that tree's, what the conditions are that tree's growing in, and just, maybe just really good genetics, maybe. So, all right, that's really all I've got. Do you have any questions?
Great. Thank you, Rob, for that overview. See, we do have one question in the queue, so I'm going to open those up and we can get to those discussions. So, question from Michael: Can Quercus alba hybridize with other white oaks such as Quercus bicolor, Macrocarpa, or Michoii naturally? And is it considered helpful to their population or detrimental?
That's a really good question. I believe it can hybridize, but I don't know if that would be a good thing or a bad thing. I guess it depends on the growing conditions and where the hybridization is taking place, and so yeah, that's something that maybe we should come back and look at. Yeah, good question though.
Yeah, and I see that we do have Jim Bardsley in the audience who's done some work with oak hybridization. So maybe that could be something I'm not sure how recently he's been working on that, but if he has suggestions, we could always circle back on this for a future discussion. Could be a really interesting road to go down. We also have a
Sure.
question from Dylan. Rob, does the WOI have a rule of thumb for what percentage of the species mix in afforestation projects should be composed of Quercus alba or Quercus generally?
Not that I've seen, but we tried to stick with 30% in our mixture, and then maybe and then a few other oak species in there. So we're not establishing a monoculture or anything. We're also mixing other species in there that are well suited to the landscape. But we're also trying to make sure that the oak component, the plantings that we did, are well represented.
Great. And Jim Bardsley did chime in with a question. He asks problems like galls or any other biological issues. So I'm not sure if he means on the plantings or those being propagated out or more broadly.
So you cut out a little bit there when you were reading the question. Could you reread that?
Yeah, Jim asks problems like galls or any other biological issues. But I'm not sure. And Jim, if you wanted to clarify your question, are you asking about white oaks generally or white oaks within the project, or the propagation? I think I'm just not clear on the scope of what's being
Sure.
asked, but maybe you have an
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. No, I don't think of it as a problem. I've not read any research or anything. I could be wrong, but as at least in my travels, I haven't seen that as an issue, or something that needs to be addressed directly. So, but I'm happy to follow up on that if Jim has a particular concern.
Great. And he did also make a note for us on the hybridization question that white oaks do hybridize extensively, including with bicolor. So thanks for that,
Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be an advantage, but it'd be an interesting project maybe.
Yeah, we don't have any questions currently in the queue, but I see that Gary has opened up his camera. That often means he has some points for discussion. So, Gary?
Sure, Rob, thank you very, very much for an excellent overview of the White Oak Initiative. I really appreciate it as a part of the webinar series. Let me ask you a couple questions that simply occur to me from a layman's standpoint. First, just you've set some ambitious long-term goals for this project. My gosh, well after the time that I'll be around, and probably even after your career at the Forest Service. So my question is, looking back on your report for 2025, which is current year, are you satisfied with the progress you're making on this in light of the overall objectives that you outlined earlier? Because it would seem that in one sense, but not a lot has happened, and things have happened, don't get me wrong, but are you satisfied with the pace of progress to address the needs that were originally articulated for this work?
Um, I certainly think there's room for improvement. And those are national level goals that we are trying to help with, and so I think that there's certainly room for improvement. But I think that when you're thinking of in terms of like 2070, they seem like daunting numbers, but I think that it's I think it's doable because you've got industry involved. You have folks that are willing to help finance a lot of the work that needs to occur through the White Oak Initiative, and there's other groups that are doing similar work, just not with White Oak in mind, and maybe something can be tweaked a little bit that can lend to satisfying those goals also with partners. So I think that they're big goals, but I think they're achievable in that time frame. Yeah.
You anticipate additional private funding being made available for this initiative in the next several years in light of the diminished public resources that are being made available for forestry over the next several years.
Say that again, Gary.
Do you anticipate additional private resources, that is, corporate investments in this initiative, in light of the fact that public resources are likely to be more constrained in the next several years?
Oh, I see. Do I anticipate that? I think so. I believe that the urban folks have deep pockets, and they are in Kentucky particularly concerned about the future. I mean, you go out there, and the FIA data supports this. There's just not much regeneration occurring, and the saplings are not reaching maturity, and it's a problem. And if they want to continue to produce the spirits that they produce that people enjoy drinking, they're going to need to help, pony up and help out with the work. It can't all be public sector funding. It can't be all public sector response. It's a diverse group of partners, and it needs to remain so, and they need to chip in. So I think they will. If that answers your question.
No, that's very helpful. Let me ask you one more last naive question. You mentioned the fact that the average age of the surveyed trees was around 75 years, and obviously they've identified a seedling problem. But in purposes of making barrels out of white oak, and white oak is a very long-lived tree. Obviously, the Maryland state tree is a white oak, and it lived, the Y oak, for example, over 400 years. How old does a tree have to be before it's a candidate for harvest for barrel staves? Is a 75-year-old tree sufficient to actually do the job that they're looking for, or do they need to be in the ground for even a longer period?
I mean, I would say that 75 years, you would probably be able to get a good butt log out of that. Probably less than that. Depends on the growing conditions and how quickly that tree can put wood on. So on a good site, it may be 40 or 50 years to reach where you're starting to talk about a saw log. So that's like I said, it depends on a lot of factors, but certainly a 70-year-old tree should be able to yield that.
The foundation sponsors a program called Healthy Forest, Healthy Waters. We talked about it in a previous webinar series. As you know, it plants trees on private lands throughout Maryland. We've planted literally hundreds of thousands of trees. I must admit, although we emphasize native species, I'm not familiar with the details of the mix of the species that are actually selected. Are you working with state incentivized planting programs so that there is a significant portion of those trees that are white oak that are being used for private planting?
Yes. So indirectly, so our DNR foresters assist with the planning of those plantings, with the planting plans, and they will look at the landscape and what kind of factors. Is it a wet landscape? Is it an upland? And they will try to match the trees that are going to survive best to those conditions that are found on each of the our landowners' planting sites. So they, we've been over this with them a lot and introduced the White Oak Initiative to them and the problem with white oak, and they're not surprised by it. They see what is occurring in the woods when they're out there all the time. At the end of the day, you can only recommend to the landowner what needs to be done. It's up to them to take the action and to do it. But we are there to help as much as possible. And so for those plantings, we're indirectly trying to influence that in the background and make sure that we have a good oak component and a good supply of oak from our state tree nursery. So.
Are white oaks very common in the urban landscape in your experience, Rob? And is that a potential source for some planting to address these needs in the future, since they tend to be receive a little bit more care in the urban environment by many people?
Yes. Many times in my travels, I pass a white oak tree in somebody's front yard. There's a really beautiful one right on Main Street in Bel Air on a private lot, and so yeah, it does well. Folks, I think, don't like the larger acorns that fall, and so they give me a problem to clean up. Something that's concerning that I've noticed is that there's a lot of dead, mature white oak out there in people's front yards. At my last workshop, I raised my hand. I didn't raise my hand. I asked folks to raise their hand if they had a dead oak tree in their front yard, and fully half of the folks there raised their hand. There is, it's a problem, and we're not sure how to solve the problem yet, other than to just keep planting and trying to make those conditions, the growing conditions, as favorable as possible.
Perhaps urban
Yeah,
white oaks might be a future source to help address some of the needs that have been identified by the corporate community, since there is always a lot of threats emerging that lead to their loss in the urban environment that I've seen.
Right.
I don't want
And really trying to keep a seed source on the landscape, whether that's urban or in a rural condition, is what I would want to see for the future. Just a diverse seed source, genetically diverse on our landscape, because that's where the hardiness comes from and the resistance to diseases.
Thank you.
yeah.
Sure.
Megan,
And
in
kind
your
of
experience, you got
piggybacking.
anything you want to ask from Baltimore?
Absolutely, yeah. So, a couple of these topics are certainly, ringing bells for me. So I guess I'll just start, thinking about, you know, so for example, in the urban environment in particular, it's a very stressful environment, so it can be harder to get things established. And urban areas are on the forefront of climate change. And so I was curious to hear if you could provide any context around how shifting climate, and I'm thinking as well about the very wet year that we're having and the oaks that we lost after the last round of a very wet year. Kind of how your outlook and approach with this project is accounting for some of those trends.
So let's see. Well, from a White Oak Initiative standpoint, they're more concerned with making sure that there's a supply of white oak out there for economic reasons. That's the initial driver of the White Oak Initiative. Keeping it on the landscape is certainly important, and in an urban sense, I guess. And so, from a climate change standpoint, it's getting hammered right now by these cycles of wet and dry, and I think that's what's accounting for a lot of the mortality in urban settings. So, and we've been seeing some recommendations to maybe plant southern red oak is projected to do well, I think, in some urban settings, the swamp white oak. So, we're going to keep trees in the landscape despite climate change, but are they going to be fulfilling the needs of society in the same way? Maybe, maybe not. Certainly from a air quality standpoint, water quality standpoint, but there's other factors involved. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And I know so thinking about, of course, like having um, you know, net future generations of trees available. I know you spoke briefly about the provenance work that you're engaged with. And I can't help but think, because Nancy Santi is on the audience, about a project that the USDA Forest Service has been leading along with the University of Delaware and other partners, looking at the effects of, or the connections between provenance and climate change. And the University of Kentucky was involved in that. Have you connected with our Forest Service colleagues to see if there's connections there to be made?
I haven't made that connection directly, but it's something I could look into.
Yeah, and Nancy, if you needed to chat with Rob, he's
I
I'm
know
sure he'll
Nancy.
make
Yeah.
his, yeah. And speaking of future connections, if you would like to, I don't recall if you had your email address or anything up. So if audience members had questions to follow up with you in the future, but if that would be available on one of your slides or anything, we'd be happy to share that out.
The slides will be available online. And Rob, I want to suggest that at least in the chat function, even today, for those who are still with us and following up immediately, that we post your contact information so they can
Oh, sure.
follow up on the White Oak Initiative more rapidly. I noticed that there are a few people who want to follow up rather quickly. That would be helpful. And Megan,
Yeah,
if there are no more questions, I'd be pleased to kind of talk about the future for a few minutes as we close out.
before you do that, the chat I don't believe is viewable by our audience currently. So if you would
Oh,
adjust the settings so that we can send out comments viewable to everyone.
Let's see if I can do that, Megan. That's always a hassle. There we go. Okay, and I noticed Nancy has a question too.
She was commenting on the Silburn Oak Orchard is one of the University of Kentucky progeny tests, and that she knows that it would be nice for us to each visit the other site sometime. Agreed.
oh yeah, definitely. And I haven't seen any preliminary results from any of that either. I'd be really curious to see that, and I'd also be I haven't seen any results for or statistics for any of the goals, like Gary had mentioned. I know what we've done in Maryland and that we've contributed to it, but I haven't seen anything nationwide yet. So I'd be curious to see how they're making progress. White Oak
Well, Rob,
landscape.
if you do get an update of that type, I'd appreciate it later on if you'd share it, as a future follow-up that we can post on the website for those who
Sure.
are interested in the details of this specific initiative, which has generated a lot of questions in the past. And I was really pleased that you could provide the presentation to update us on how it's actually maturing here in Maryland.
Sure. Yeah, happy to be here.
Megan, I tried to open up the chat to quote everyone. I'm not sure that worked, but let's hope so.
If you'd like to make me co-host real quick, then I can make that tweak while you
The answer is
address the
yes.
final points that you wanted to go over with.
The answer is I'll try to do that. I can figure out how to do that.
I think you need to mouse over my picture and click on the three dots.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Great,
How's that?
thank you. Let's see.
Always helps when you can do that because I don't know all the buttons to push.
I don't know if that went through. I haven't gotten a notice that I'm a co-host. Okay, I think I have it.
Okay.
All right. And Rob, I'm just going to copy paste your comment. So for folks in the audience, Rob's contact info is now in the chat. Thanks for bearing with us.
Yeah, and happy to chat on the phone as well if necessary, and you know, if you really want to get into it, and but certainly just email me, reach out, and I'll be on leave next week and traveling tomorrow, but you know, happy to follow up sooner rather than later.
Excellent. Well, Gary, we have about 2 minutes remaining if you had final comments that you want to close out with.
I did want to close out with just a brief preview of what lies ahead for a few people, plus it'll be on the recording for the session. For those of you who are interested in emerging threats to the forests, one of the prevailing trends we have is trying to raise information about those and share emerging kind of what's going on. Next month, we're going to be talking about beach blight, which at least some people are talking about as a really emerging major threat, comparable to some of the historic threats to the forest that have emerged, like, oh my gosh, for Chesapeakes and elms and chestnuts. There are all sorts of things that are out there these days, but beach blight is really scary for many people. And I did want to remind all of you that in September, as we're concluding our 4th year and getting ready to start our 5th year in the series, Dr. Doug Talmy will be our featured speaker in September, always on the 3rd Thursday at 1 o'clock. So pass the information on. We'd be pleased to share it. He's going to be talking about how to create a sustainable landscape 1 yard at a time. And the fall offerings prove to be also equally exciting. We're going to be talking about land preservation. We're going to be talking about the emerging threat of data centers on the landscape and how they are being addressed to mitigate some of the impact they have on forest cover for their transmission and installation. So lots of topics that are going to continue to be the source of concern for a great many people and help shape the future of discussion around forestry. I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank Rob for his excellent presentation and hope all of you will join us again next month on the 3rd Thursday at 1 o'clock to talk about how we frame the issues. Talk about the future of forestry in Maryland. Well, thank you for joining us today. And Megan, have a good August. We'll see you a little bit later there. And Rob, I know you're on travel. Take care, buddy. Good to see all of you today. Stay cool.
Thanks, Gary.
Bye-bye.
Take care.